There's a very specific kind of frustration that I think everyone listening right now has felt at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that moment when you're just scrolling through your social media feed, it's late at night, and you see one fitness expert screaming, "You must eat raw liver to survive."
Right, the raw meat guys.
Yeah, and then literally the very next post you scroll to is a doctor in a white coat saying that red meat will kill you instantly.
It's exhausting.
It really is. And then a third person pops up and they're selling you this vibrating belt that supposedly melts belly fat while you just sit there and watch Netflix.
Which is exactly why people just give up. It is the paralysis of analysis. I mean, the fitness industry is practically built on this confusion. If everyone actually knew what to do, nobody would buy the secret to looking like a superhero in 3 weeks, you know?
Exactly. And that brings us to the core quote that anchors our entire deep dive today. It's blunt, it's a little bit painful to hear maybe, but it cuts through all of that noise like a knife.
I know exactly the quote you're talking about.
Yeah, you cannot out-science hard training.
That is the absolute ethos of the man we are discussing today, Dr. Layne Norton. And frankly, it's a terrifying concept for people who are, well, looking for a shortcut.
We all want a shortcut.
Right.
Hmm.
We want the science to save us from the sweat. We want a pill. But Norton's argument, and the argument of the source material we've analyzed for this deep dive, is that the science actually points directly back to the sweat.
So we are dedicating this deep dive entirely to his work. Specifically, we're looking at his really comprehensive insights on muscle, metabolism, diet, and supplements. And the reason we're focusing on Layne is because he is a bit of a unicorn in this space. He calls himself a dual threat.
Which is accurate, and actually quite rare. Usually in the fitness world, you have two very distinct, very separate camps.
Lab guys and the gym guys.
Exactly. You have the lab coat camp.
Yeah.
These are academics who understand the Krebs cycle and protein synthesis pathways down to the molecule, but they haven't lifted a heavy weight in their lives.
Right.
And then you have the bro science camp, guys who are massive, incredibly strong, shredded, but their advice is basically just, trust me, bro, it works for me.
Eat chicken and broccoli until you pass out.
Yeah, exactly. And Layne sits right smack in the middle of those two worlds.
Because he's got the academic chops.
He does. He has a PhD in nutritional sciences with a specific focus on muscle protein metabolism. So he has the academic rigor, he understands the biochemistry at a fundamental level. But he is also a natural professional bodybuilder and a powerlifter who has squatted over 660 pounds.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. He bridges the gap between the ivory tower of academia and the gritty chalk dust reality of the squat rack.
So our mission today, for everyone listening, is to use that dual perspective to build you a scientifically backed blueprint. We're going to look at the psychology of consistency, the actual physics of metabolism, the mechanics of how to truly build muscle, and then we're going straight into the fire.
The nutrition myths.
Oh yeah. Seed oils, artificial sweeteners, carnivore diets, all of it.
We're probably going to upset some people today.
Undoubtedly.
And that's okay, because as Layne often says, the data doesn't care about our feelings.
I love that. Let's just start right where Layne starts. And interestingly, for a guy who lifts incredibly heavy iron, he doesn't actually start with the physical body. He starts with the brain.
The mindset is everything.
Yeah. He talks about this modern obsession with minutia.
This is what he calls the major and the minors problem. And you see this constantly with people trying to get in shape. They spend all their mental energy on tiny details.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like they want to know about the absolute optimal angle of their pinky finger during a cable chest fly. Or they want to know if they should take their ashwagandha supplement for cortisol modulation at exactly 8 p.m. or if 9 p.m. is better.
Right. They're obsessed with that final 1% of optimization.
Meanwhile, and this is the kicker, meanwhile, they're only sleeping 5 hours a night. They're missing half of their scheduled workouts. And their overall diet is 80% highly processed food.
So they're worried about the paint job on a car that doesn't have an engine.
That is a perfect way to put it. Layne calls the basics the big boulders. Sleep, overall calorie balance, macronutrients, and progressive overload in the gym. Until you move the boulders, the pebbles, meaning the expensive supplements and the fancy biohacks, they simply do not matter.
He uses a visualization for this concept that I found incredibly helpful when I was reading through the material. It's the marble bowl analogy.
Oh, I love this one. He actually credits this to a dietitian named Ben Carpenter.
Right. I want to paint this picture for you, the listener, because it really stuck with me and shifted how I view my own diet.
It's brilliant because it completely solves the perfectionism trap that so many of us fall into.
So visualize two bowls in front of you. One bowl is filled entirely with blue marbles. And let's say the blue marbles represent a quote-unquote bad diet.
Junk food, sporadic eating times, very low protein, excessively high calories.
Exactly. And the other bowl is filled with green marbles. These represent nutrient-dense whole foods, high protein, plenty of fiber, appropriate calories.
Okay, so let's say I have a bowl of blue marbles. I have a historically terrible diet.
Right. Now, if you have that bowl of blue marbles and you drop just one single green marble into it, say you eat one healthy chicken salad on a Wednesday, does it magically change the nature of the entire bowl?
No, of course not. It's still a bowl of junk. It's just a blue bowl with one tiny speck of green in it.
Exactly. One good decision doesn't fix a lifestyle of bad ones. We all logically understand that. But here is the massive kicker. Our brains are hardwired to be entirely catastrophic about the reverse scenario.
The what the hell effect?
Yes. Imagine you have a bowl of green marbles. You've been super consistent for months. You were training hard, you were eating well, sleeping well. And then it's a Tuesday night. You're stressed and you eat a whole pizza. You just dropped one blue marble into your green bowl.
Does that one blue marble ruin the bowl?
Logically, no. It's just one tiny blue marble in a massive sea of green ones. The bowl is still overwhelmingly green.
But psychologically, people view that one blue marble as a nuclear bomb going off in their diet.
We really do. They think, well, I blew it. I completely ruined the diet. I have zero discipline. I might as well just eat ice cream for the rest of the week and start over on Monday.
They let one single marble convince them to pick up a hammer and smash the entire bowl.
If I can't be 100% perfect, I will be 0% perfect.
Precisely. And Layne's core point here is that consistency is literally just mass action over time. It is simple, undeniable math. If you reach the end of the year and your bowl has vastly more green marbles than blue ones, you win.
You reach your goals.
Yes, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to be net positive. It is about the accumulation of behavior, not judging yourself on a single isolated event.
This directly ties into how he views failure. And I don't mean muscular failure in the gym yet. We are definitely going to get there. I mean real life failure.
Yeah.
Screwing up.
Yeah.
Binge eating. Missing a whole week of the gym because you got lazy.
Right.
He told a story in the source material about his PhD research days that was actually quite moving.
It was about his protein synthesis experiments, right?
Yes. He spent 18 months, a full year and a half of his life, trying to get this one specific scientific assay to work on frozen muscle tissue. Just imagine that level of frustration. 18 months of grinding in the lab, running these complex reactions, and getting absolutely zero usable data.
I think most people would have just quit. I would have changed my thesis topic after 3 months.
Totally. He actually said he would come home with tears in his eyes. He felt like a total fraud. He thought he just wasn't cut out for the world of science.
Yeah.
But he just kept showing up.
And eventually he realized that the failure wasn't a stop sign. It was just data collection.
Exactly. He started saying, okay, that didn't work. Why? What specific variable was off? Was the room temperature wrong? Was the chemical reagent bad?
They took the emotion out of the failure.
Yes. And he actively applies this exact scientific mindset to his nutrition coaching today. He mentioned this one client he had, a high-level hedge fund manager who was binge eating almost every single day.
Now, the typical human reaction to binge eating is overwhelming shame. People say to themselves, I am weak, I have no willpower, I am just a glutton.
But shame is a terrible driver for long-term change.
It is the worst driver because shame physically shuts down the analytical, problem-solving part of your brain. Layne doesn't do shame. He essentially asks the guy, okay, you binged, let's look at the data. What happened in your environment right before you started eating?
He was looking for the antecedent, the trigger.
Exactly. And together they found a very clear pattern. The guy would come home incredibly stressed from his high-pressure job, walk straight into the kitchen, and the junk food was sitting right there on the counter, out in the open.
So it was just immediate access.
Right. He was eating on pure autopilot. It wasn't actually physical hunger. It was a conditioned stress response triggered by visual cues in his environment. He's basically in a trance.
So what was the fix for this guy? Because telling a stressed hedge fund manager to just try harder clearly wasn't going to work.
No, because willpower is a highly finite resource. If you constantly rely on willpower, you will eventually fail when you get tired. They used the concept of friction. They literally put a physical combination lock on his refrigerator.
Which sounds completely extreme, putting a lock on your own fridge.
It sounds totally insane on the surface, but think deeply about the underlying mechanism. He didn't lock the fridge because he physically couldn't open it. He knew the combination code.
Right, he could open it anytime he wanted.
He locked it to break the psychological trance. He would walk to the fridge in a stressed-out daze, reach for the handle, and it simply wouldn't open. That split second of physical resistance forced his conscious, logical brain to come back online.
It creates a necessary gap between the stimulus and the response.
Yes. It forced him to pause and ask himself, wait, am I actually physically hungry right now, or am I just stressed from work?
And usually the honest answer was just that he was stressed.
Exactly. That is the huge actionable takeaway for you listening right now. If you are struggling with a bad habit, stop telling yourself to just try harder. Increase the friction for the bad behavior and decrease the friction for the good behavior.
Make the good choice the easy choice.
Have your gym bag packed and sitting ready by the front door. Hide the cookies on a high shelf in the garage, or better yet, don't bring them into the house at all. Engineer your daily environment so you don't have to rely on your highly exhaustible willpower.
That is incredibly practical. Let's pivot now from the mind to the engine of the body itself, the metabolism. Because this is the area where Layne really starts to heavily deconstruct the excuses we tend to tell ourselves.
Oh, the metabolism excuses.
We have all heard it or even said it. I'm eating only 1,200 calories a day and I'm still gaining weight. My metabolism is completely broken. I must have a slow thyroid.
The slow metabolism myth. This is a highly controversial topic because people genuinely feel like their lived reality is being denied. They feel like they truly are trying as hard as they can.
But Layne points directly to a landmark study from 1992 in the New England Journal of Medicine to address this. And this study is basically the gold standard for this specific topic.
It is a phenomenal piece of research.
Set the scene for us. What exactly did the researchers do?
They took a group of obese individuals who medically claimed they were diet resistant. These were people who swore, on the medical record, that they were eating less than 1,200 calories a day and not losing a single pound.
So they were claiming their metabolisms were defying the laws of physics.
Exactly. So the researchers put them in a metabolic ward.
Which means they are totally, completely monitored. No sneaking snacks from the pantry.
Correct. Every calorie is accounted for. And they used a technique called doubly labeled water to accurately measure their total energy expenditure.
Break that down for us. What is doubly labeled water?
It's a highly precise scientific method where you drink water that contains specific trackable isotopes. And by measuring exactly how those isotopes eventually leave the body in your urine and your sweat over time, researchers can calculate exactly how many calories a person is organically burning.
It's just pure physics.
Yeah.
You literally cannot cheat the doubly labeled water test.
You cannot cheat it.
And what did this bulletproof study actually find?
They found two completely devastating things for the slow metabolism argument. First, every single one of their metabolic rates was totally normal. In fact, because they were living in heavier bodies, and larger bodies require more energy just to move around, their metabolic rates were actually slightly higher than a skinny person's metabolic rate.
Okay, so the internal engine was working perfectly fine. They did not have slow metabolisms.
Not at all. And second, and this is the absolute clincher, the study revealed they were underreporting their daily food intake by a staggering 47%.
47%.
Yeah.
That is a massive margin of error. That is essentially eating double what you actually think you are eating.
And it gets worse. They were also over-reporting their physical activity by 50%.
Wow.
Now, Layne is very, very emphatic about how we interpret this. These people were not malicious liars. They weren't actively trying to trick the doctors or sabotage the
But
study.
you're just deluding themselves.
It is the rose-colored glasses effect of nutrition. Human memory is terrible when it comes to grazing. You completely forget about the quick handful of M&Ms you grabbed from your coworker's desk. You severely underestimate the amount of olive oil you casually poured into the roasting pan.
You ignore the 3 bites of mac and cheese you took off your kid's plate while you were cleaning up dinner.
Exactly. It all adds up silently. Layne even gave a great example of his own salad order at a restaurant to show just how incredibly easy this is to do.
Right, because even a PhD in nutrition can fall into this trap.
He orders this grilled chicken salad. Sounds super healthy, right? It's a big bowl of green leaves. But when he took it home and actually weighed the cheese, weighed the heavy dressing, weighed the croutons, it was over 600 calories more than he had visually estimated.
600 extra calories in a healthy salad.
If a literal doctor of nutritional science can misjudge a simple salad by 600 calories, what chance does the average person have without measuring?
So the overarching takeaway here isn't necessarily that you have to meticulously track your calories every day for the rest of your life. It's that you probably have absolutely no idea what you are actually eating unless you do track strictly for a little while to learn.
Tracking is an educational tool. It recalibrates your eyeballs. Layne uses a finance analogy. You don't need to meticulously balance your checkbook every single day to have money in the bank, but if you are broke, you better start looking at those daily statements to see where the leaks are.
You cannot manage what you do not accurately measure.
Precisely.
Now, staying within that metabolic conversation, there is a technical anatomical distinction that Layne makes that I think is absolutely crucial for our listeners to grasp. He talks about the difference between lean mass versus skeletal muscle.
Most people use those terms totally interchangeably.
We do, but they aren't the same thing at all.
And understanding the difference is vital for understanding why lifting weights is so important. When you go get a DECA's body fat scan, the number they give you for lean body mass is literally just everything in your body that isn't fat.
So what does that include?
It includes your retained water weight, your bone density, all of your internal organs, your liver, your heart, your brain, and your actual muscles. Now, your organs are metabolically very expensive tissues. Your liver alone burns a massive amount of calories every day, just keeping you alive.
But you cannot intentionally train your liver to get bigger and burn more calories.
Right. Liver hypertrophy is usually a symptom of a terrible disease, not a fitness goal. We do not do liver curls in the gym.
I'm just picturing someone trying to flex their liver.
So out of all that lean mass, the only highly variable tissue, the only tissue we have direct voluntary control over growing through effort is skeletal muscle. And Layne beautifully describes skeletal muscle as a giant glucose sink.
I love that specific image. Unpack the glucose sink concept for us.
When you eat carbohydrates, whether that's a piece of bread, a bowl of rice, or an apple, your body breaks them down into glucose, which enters your bloodstream.
Blood sugar.
Exactly. Now, chronically high blood sugar is highly toxic to the body. Your body needs to quickly clear that glucose out of the blood. It essentially has two main storage facilities to put it in. It can shove it into your fat cells, or it can store it inside your muscle cells as something called glycogen.
So if you have built a lot of skeletal muscle over the years,
You have built a massive biological reservoir, a huge sink to easily soak up all that incoming glucose.
so having more muscle literally changes the mathematical way your body processes the food you eat.
It fundamentally changes your physiology. It gives you incredible metabolic flexibility. Having that large glucose sink actively protects you from developing insulin resistance, which protects you from type 2 diabetes.
This completely shifts the narrative around lifting weights.
It really does. This is why resistance training is not just a vanity project to look good at the beach. It is a frontline metabolic health intervention. When you build muscle, you are literally building a bigger, more efficient engine to safely process the fuel you consume.
Which leads us perfectly into the gym itself. If muscle is the ultimate currency of a healthy metabolism, how do we actually earn it? Layne systematically breaks down the biological mechanism of hypertrophy, which is just the scientific term for muscle growth, into three very specific drivers.
And the scientific consensus here has evolved quite a bit recently. We used to firmly believe that you had to cause severe microscopic tears in the muscle to force it to grow, the old tear it to repair it mentality.
You had to be incredibly sore the next day or it didn't count.
Exactly. But modern research shows that muscle damage is actually not the primary driver of growth at all. Excessive damage can actually slow down your progress because you spend all your energy repairing the tissue instead of adding new tissue.
So if damage isn't the key, what is driver number one?
The absolute primary driver is mechanical tension.
Define mechanical tension for us in practical terms.
It is the literal physical force that the individual muscle fibers experience when trying to move a load. But here is the critical nuance that most people miss in the gym. It is not just putting heavy weight on the bar.
What do you mean? Heavy weight equals tension, doesn't it?
Not always. You can load 500 pounds onto a bench press, but if you aggressively bounce that bar off your rib cage and use explosive momentum to heave it back up, the actual pectoral muscle fibers aren't experiencing that much tension. Your tendons and joints took the brunt of the force.
So tension requires control.
Tension is the language the muscle naturally speaks. When you control the weight, you force the muscle fibers to bear the entire load. The muscle then miraculously converts that mechanical signal into a chemical signal that tells your DNA, hey, we need to build more proteins and get stronger to survive this stress next time.
That makes total sense. You have to make the muscle do the actual work.
So that brings us to driver number 2, which is proximity to failure. This is where that quote about hard work comes roaring back. The scientific literature is overwhelmingly clear on this. To maximize a hypertrophy signal, you need to push a set within 2 to 3 repetitions of total muscular failure.
Meaning if someone held a gun to my head, I physically could only grind out maybe 2 more agonizing reps before the weight crushed me.
Correct. That is the necessary intensity zone. And the glaring problem is most casual gym goers stop their set the moment it starts to burn.
They confuse the burn with failure.
Exactly. They confuse metabolic stress, which is just the accumulation of lactic acid causing that burning sensation, with actual mechanical failure. They put the weight down because it hurts, but biologically, they easily had 8 or 9 reps left in the tank.
They weren't even close to the growth zone.
Not even close. Layne cites these hilarious but revealing studies where researchers ask subjects to perform a set until they think they hit failure. The subjects stop and say, I'm done, I can't do another one.
And then what happens?
Then the researchers step in, start aggressively screaming at them, hyping them up, offering them money, and suddenly the subject miraculously grinds out 10 more full repetitions.
So as humans, we are just terrible judges of our own physical limits.
We are terrible at it. We are highly evolved preservation machines. Our brain's primary job is to stop us from experiencing extreme discomfort.
So how do we fix that? Do we have to train to absolute failure on every single set?
No, and Layne actually advises against that. Training to total failure on every set causes too much systemic nervous system fatigue and ruins your recovery. But his recommendation is that you should take sets to total ugly failure occasionally, purely to calibrate your internal radar.
You have to know where the actual cliff edge is so you can safely park your car 2 feet away from it.
That is a perfect analogy. If you've never truly failed a lift, you don't know what 2 reps shy of failure actually feels like.
Okay, so we have mechanical tension, we have proximity to failure. What is driver number 3? Because this one seems a bit newer in the mainstream fitness conversation.
It is relatively new in terms of mainstream focus. Driver number 3 is muscle length. The current research is heavily showing that training a muscle in its lengthened position, meaning when it is fully stretched under a heavy load, provides a vastly superior growth stimulus compared to the contracted position.
Give us a clear, practical example of what that looks like in a workout.
Think about a standard dumbbell bicep curl. Most people focus on the very top of the movement, squeezing the bicep hard by their shoulder. But the research says the most important part of the entire repetition is actually the very bottom.
When your arm is fully straight down and the bicep muscle is completely stretched out.
Yes, that loaded stretch at the bottom creates massive mechanical tension. Or think about a barbell squat. The very bottom of the squat, deep down in the hole when your glutes and quads are maximally stretched, is where the real hypertrophy magic happens.
But that's exactly the part of the range of motion that most people cut short because it's the hardest part.
Exactly. They do the easy middle half of the rep and avoid the deep stretch. Layne's advice is clear, go deep. Embrace the discomfort of the stretch. That is where the biological signaling for growth is the absolute strongest.
So having full range of motion isn't just about being a form police stickler. It is actually about optimizing your biology.
Don't cheat the stretch, or you are just cheating your own gains.
Now, speaking of gym snobs and the form police, Layne brought up a really great counterpoint to the optimization crowd, and he used the legendary bodybuilder Phil Heath as the ultimate example.
Phil Heath is a fascinating case study. He is a 7-time Mr. Olympia winner, arguably possesses one of the greatest, most muscular physiques in the history of human genetics.
And what was his big secret that upsets the purists?
Phil Heath rarely, if ever, performed traditional heavy barbell squats or standard deadlifts off the floor.
Which is pure blasphemy in some lifting circles. People will swear you absolutely have to do the big 3 lifts: squat, bench, deadlift, or you'll never grow.
It drives the purist absolutely crazy. He built his massive tree trunk legs primarily using hack squat machines and heavy leg presses. And Layne openly admits in the source material that he used to be a massive snob about this very thing.
Because Layne is a powerlifter. He loves the barbell.
Right. Layne used to think if you aren't using a barbell, you aren't really training hard. But he had to look at the physiology. The muscle tissue itself does not have eyes. It does not know if you are holding a generic rusted iron barbell or if you are pushing against a $5,000 perfectly biomechanically engineered machine.
The muscle only detects one thing.
Tension. It only detects the mechanical tension we just talked about.
So if a machine hack squat allows a sadistic person to go much deeper into the stretch with significantly more control and, crucially, with less lower back pain than a standard barbell squat,
Then the machine hack squat is objectively the superior hypertrophy exercise for that specific individual.
this brings up the massive factor of compliance.
Compliance is everything. The absolute best exercise program in the world is simply the one you can stick to consistently without getting injured. If the barbell back squat tweaks your lower back every single time you do it, you're eventually going to start skipping leg day.
And remember, consistency is about accumulating those green marbles. You can't accumulate marbles if you're injured on the couch.
Exactly. Find the movement that fits your specific skeletal structure, train it close to failure, and don't worry if it's not the trendy exercise on social media.
Speaking of being injured on the couch, this next section of Layne's material was probably the most paradigm-shifting concept for me personally. We really need to dive deep into the biopsychosocial model of pain.
This concept is incredibly complex, but once you grasp it, it completely changes how you view your own body. We are all traditionally taught a very mechanical model of pain. We are taught that pain directly equals tissue damage.
Right. If my lower back hurts, I must have slipped a disc. If my knee aches, my meniscus must be torn. It's cause and effect.
And Layne says that is largely false, or at least highly incomplete.
Which is wild to hear. How can pain not mean damage?
Because pain is not an input from the body. Pain is actually an output produced by the brain. It is an evolutionary threat signal. Your brain acts as a central computer, taking in millions of data points, sensory data from your nerves, yes, but also emotional data, current psychological stress levels, sleep deprivation, and even your past history of trauma.
It compiles all that data constantly.
It compiles it and constantly asks one question: is this specific situation dangerous to our survival? If the brain decides the answer is yes, it forcefully creates the sensation of pain to make you stop moving and protect yourself.
So you can actually experience severe physical pain without having any actual structural tissue damage.
100%. And conversely, you can have massive structural damage and feel zero pain.
Give me the evidence on that, because people will be skeptical.
Look at massive MRI studies of healthy individuals over the age of 40. Huge percentages of these people, we are talking 40, 50%, has severely bulging spinal discs, torn rotator cuffs, and visible arthritis on their scans, yet they report absolutely zero daily pain.
They're just walking around totally fine, completely unaware that their tissues are quote-unquote damaged.
Exactly. Their brains do not perceive the structural anomalies as an active threat. But on the flip side, you have people with debilitating, crippling back pain, and their MRI comes back completely pristine, no damage at all.
So if the tissue isn't broken, what is actually driving that intense pain?
Often it is the psycho and social parts of that biopsychosocial model. It is heavy psychological stress and lack of sleep causing the nervous system to become hypervigilant. Layne dropped a specific statistic in this section that should honestly scare every single person listening into going to bed early tonight.
You mean the military soldier study?
Yes. Researchers systematically tracked the injury rates of active duty soldiers. They found that soldiers who consistently slept only 4 hours a night had a 236% higher risk of physical injury compared to the soldiers sleeping 8 hours a night.
236%. That is nearly triple the risk of blowing out a knee or pulling a muscle just from losing sleep.
It's staggering. And it's not just because they were sleepy and clumsy. When you are chronically sleep deprived, your entire nervous system becomes biologically hypersensitive. It perceives threat everywhere.
Because you were functionally vulnerable.
Right. So as a protective mechanism, it reflexively tightens your muscles. It drastically lowers the threshold required to trigger a pain signal.
So if you are someone who feels like you are quote-unquote prone to injury, or you're always tweaking something in the gym, maybe you aren't actually physically fragile. Maybe you are just chronically exhausted and highly stressed.
It is highly, highly likely. Layne talked quite openly about his own devastating back injury. He was in chronic, severe pain for years. He actually thought his professional powerlifting career was completely over.
He had fully convinced himself he was fundamentally broken.
He mentally identified as a broken person, which just feeds the brain's threat assessment and creates more pain. It's a vicious cycle.
So how did he eventually fix it? Did he get surgery?
No. He used a psychological and physical concept called graded exposure. He uses a catchy phrase for it: motion is lotion.
Walk us through that specific process. How do you intentionally expose yourself to the very movement that causes you severe pain?
He realized that completely avoiding the painful movement was actually making his sensitivity much worse. The brain rapidly learns fear. If you strictly avoid bending over for a year, your brain strongly associates the action of bending over with extreme danger.
So doing nothing reinforces the threat.
Exactly. So he started doing what are called pin squats. He set the heavy metal safety pins inside the squat rack very, very high. So when he unracked the heavy bar, he only had to squat down maybe 3 or 4 inches before the bar hit the pin safely.
A tiny, tiny range of motion.
Barely moving. And crucially, it caused absolutely no pain. So he did that tiny movement consistently for a while.
He's basically teaching his brain, see, we are perfectly safe. We have a heavy load on our back, we bent our knees, and nothing bad happened.
Exactly. He is proving safety to his own nervous system. Then, after a few weeks, he lowered the safety pins by just 1 single inch.
Pushing the boundary just a tiny bit.
Still entirely safe. No pain. Then, a week later, another inch lower. Over the meticulous course of 16 long weeks, he slowly desensitized his hyperreactive nervous system. He didn't magically heal the damaged tissue. The tissue was likely already healed. He rewired his internal alarm system.
And now he's back to squatting massive weights completely pain-free.
Yes.
That is an incredibly empowering message. It means we aren't helplessly at the mercy of our old injuries forever. We aren't permanently broken.
No, the human body is remarkably adaptable, but you absolutely have to respect the psychological process. You can't just jump back into the deep end on day one. You have to slowly, gently nudge the physical boundary. You have to earn the right to move by proving safety to your own brain.
This seamlessly leads us to a rather sobering reality that applies to all of us listening, regardless of our current fitness level. Aging. We are all getting older every second. And Layne brings up a chilling concept called the disability threshold.
This is, in my opinion, the single most practical, non-aesthetic reason to lift weights consistently throughout your life. As we naturally age, we inevitably lose muscle mass. It is a biological process called sarcopenia.
And we lose bone density too, right?
Yes, osteopenia. It is a slow, steady, seemingly invisible decline in physical capacity. And eventually, if you live long enough, you cross a specific biological line, the disability threshold.
What happens when you cross that line?
That is the tragic point where you fundamentally lack the physical strength required to stand up off a low toilet unassisted, or the strength to carry a bag of groceries up 3 stairs, or the rapid, fast-twitch muscle fiber response to catch your own balance when you trip on a rug.
And once you cross that threshold, you instantly lose your physical independence. You become reliant on others.
And medically, the mortality rates at that point skyrocket. A fractured hip from a minor fall in someone over the age of 65 is a catastrophic, often life-ending event. It is usually the beginning of a rapid downward spiral.
Because they get put on bed rest, they lose even more muscle, and they get pneumonia.
Precisely. But here's the good news. Heavy resistance training actively builds a buffer against that threshold. If you spend time building a significantly large amount of muscle in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s...
You're starting that natural biological decline from a much, much higher peak.
Exactly. If you start with massive muscle reserves, you might decline as you age, but you might never actually dip low enough to hit that disability threshold before you pass away from old age.
It's literally a physical 401k retirement account for your body. You are aggressively banking strength right now for when you desperately need to cash it out later.
It is the best retirement investment you can possibly make, and it is truly never too late to start investing. Even people in their 70s show remarkable muscle growth when they start lifting weights.
Before we leave the physiology of the body and fully move into the specific foods we eat, I want to touch on a topic that causes immense frustration: menopause. Layne had a very specific, data-driven insight for women navigating this, who suddenly feel like their own body has completely turned against them.
Yes, this is a huge point of friction. Many women experience this phenomenon where they hit menopause, and suddenly their metabolism seems to hit an absolute brick wall.
They start rapidly gaining weight, despite swearing they're eating the exact same amount of food they always have.
And it feels incredibly unfair. But Layne points to the data to clarify what is actually happening. He shows that the basal metabolic rate, the BMR, which is the baseline energy your internal organs burn just to keep you alive, does not significantly crash simply due to menopause itself.
Wait, really? The baseline engine stays the same? Then what is changing? Why the sudden stubborn weight gain?
It is their NEAT that dramatically drops.
NEAT. N-E-A-T. Explain what that stands for.
It stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is not your structured hour at the gym. This is all the subconscious movement you do all day long. It's the nervous fidgeting at your desk, the pacing while you talk on the phone, the casually standing up to grab water, the hand gestures you use while speaking.
All those tiny micro movements burn a surprising amount of calories, right?
A massive amount, hundreds of calories a day. But when estrogen levels drastically drop during menopause, women frequently experience profound chronic fatigue, intense hot flashes, disrupted sleep, and general joint aching.
So they just naturally feel awful.
Yes. And as a direct physiological result, entirely subconsciously, without ever realizing they are doing it, they simply move less.
They sit down heavily instead of pacing. They stop fidgeting.
Exactly. Their body conserves energy because it feels stressed and tired. And that seemingly slight unconscious reduction in daily movement compounded over 365 days.
Easily equals 10 or 15 pounds of unexplained weight gain over a year.
Yes. The math perfectly explains it. The vital solution here isn't to violently starve yourself or crash diet. It is to become fiercely, intentionally active.
You have to force the issue.
Get a simple step counter. Force the daily movement that used to just happen automatically when you felt vibrant. You essentially have to intellectually override the hormonal fatigue signals your body is sending you.
All right. Let us formally enter the war zone. The nutrition deep dive. It is essentially Layne Norton versus the entire internet at this point. Let's start with the absolute basic building block of nutrition. Protein. We all know we generally need it. But what is the actual scientifically optimal number?
The current evidence-based golden number for maximizing muscle growth is roughly 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Okay, let's translate that for the Americans listening who use pounds.
That translates roughly to 0.7 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of total body weight.
So for a 200-pound man, we were looking at roughly 150 to maybe 160 grams of high-quality protein every single day.
Give or take a few grams, yes. And Layne emphatically stresses that your total daily intake at the end of 24 hours is by far the most important variable to focus on.
Which is a huge relief, because the old bodybuilding magazines used to tell us we had to eat exactly 30 grams of protein every 3 hours on the dot, or our muscles would instantly waste away.
The anabolic window myth. Yeah, you do not need to stress about perfectly timing 6 mini meals. If you just get the total daily amount in your system, whether that's in 3 meals or 5 meals, you are basically 95% of the way to optimal.
That makes life so much easier. But there's one specific exception to this rule that he brought up, and it directly connects back to our discussion on aging.
Yes. Age drastically changes the protein equation. There is a documented biological phenomenon known as anabolic resistance.
Anabolic resistance, what does that mean at a cellular level?
As we get older, our muscle tissues actually become biologically deaf to the chemical signal of protein. Think of it like a volume knob. A 20-year-old eats 15 grams of protein, and their youthful muscles hear that signal loudly and go, "Great, let's start synthesizing new tissue immediately."
But when a 60-year-old eats that exact same 15 grams,
the older muscles essentially shrug and say, "I didn't hear anything." The volume is turned too low to trigger the growth machinery.
So older adults actually need larger, concentrated doses of protein just to shout loudly enough for their muscles to finally hear it.
Exactly. As you age past your 50s and 60s, you need to ensure you are consuming robust, heavy boluses of protein. We're talking 30, 40, maybe even 50 grams in a single sitting, just to force that same anabolic growth response you used to get easily in your 20s.
So the common wisdom that old people should eat less meat and less protein is completely backward. The requirement actually goes up as you age, not down.
Scientifically, yes, it goes up to fight the resistance.
Okay, now let's talk about the ingredient that the internet loves to hate. Seed oils.
Oh boy. The most toxic subject on the internet.
Canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. If you go on any health-focused social media platform today, you will see influencers claiming these oils are literal toxic sludge, entirely responsible for the obesity epidemic, inflammation, and every modern disease known to mankind.
This specific topic is genuinely one of Layne's biggest professional pet peeves because the actual clinical data is so incredibly clear, yet the public narrative is so confidently wrong.
Let's break down the influencer argument first. Why do they claim it's toxic?
The core argument is that seed oils are very high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, specifically something called linoleic acid, and they argue that omega-6s are inherently inflammatory in the human body.
And are they inflammatory?
Mechanistically, in an isolated petri dish, or in a highly specific theoretical pathway, there is a mechanism where they absolutely could be inflammatory. But biological systems are vastly more complex than a single isolated pathway. We have to look at actual human outcome data.
What actually happens when living humans eat the oil?
Exactly. And when we look at the gold standard of evidence, long-term randomized control trials, here is exactly what we see. When you take a human diet and systematically substitute saturated fats, things like heavy butter, lard, beef tallow, with polyunsaturated fats like seed oils,
What happens to their health markers?
systemic markers of inflammation generally go down, or at worst, they stay completely neutral. Furthermore, overall cardiovascular disease risk objectively goes down.
Wait, so substituting heavy butter for standard canola oil or soybean oil is actually proven to be heart healthy?
Overwhelmingly, yes. The human clinical trials consistently show improved blood lipid profiles and lower cardiovascular events.
Then where is the massive disconnect? Why do people think it's literally poison?
Layne adds a massive crucial caveat that explains the confusion. Heated, and specifically reheated, seed oils are absolutely bad for you.
Like the oil sitting in a massive deep fryer at a cheap fast food joint.
Yes. If you subject these fragile polyunsaturated oils to incredibly high temperatures repeatedly for hours on end, they chemically oxidize. They break down and create highly reactive polar compounds that are genuinely harmful to cellular health.
So the context of how the oil is used changes everything.
Completely. But Layne asks the incredibly obvious question that the internet ignores. If you are regularly eating a giant plate of greasy french fries and deep-fried chicken wings, is it really the microscopic oxidation of the frying oil that is actively destroying your health?
No, it's probably the fact that you are eating a heavily processed, highly palatable, 1,500-calorie salt and fat bomb.
Exactly. It is the hypercaloric vehicle that is the real danger. The seed oil is just along for the ride in a terrible diet.
So the takeaway is obviously don't drink oxidized deep fryer oil.
Right. But using a quick spray of canola oil on your skillet at home to cook your chicken breast, it is absolutely not toxic sludge. It is perfectly fine. Stop worrying about the pebbles and focus on the major boulders.
That leads perfectly into the next demonized dietary staple, artificial sweeteners, specifically diet soda and aspartame.
Another ingredient that people think is actively poisoning them. Layne takes a very pragmatic, net-benefit scientific approach here. He strictly looks at the weight loss data.
Because there are studies actively comparing drinking plain water to drinking diet soda for weight loss, right?
Yes. And the results usually shock people. In many tightly controlled trials, people actually lose more total body weight when they are allowed to drink diet soda compared to the groups forced to drink only plain water.
Why on earth would that happen? Water is 0 calories. Diet soda is 0 calories. The math should be identical.
Because diet soda safely satisfies the psychological sweet tooth. If you put someone on a strict diet and tell them you can only drink plain water for the next 6 months, they start to feel incredibly restricted, they feel deprived, they intensely miss the sensation of flavor,
So the restriction builds up.
and eventually that psychological pressure bursts and they go eat a massive 500-calorie chocolate chip cookie to get that sweet hit.
But if they have a Diet Coke,
If they drink a cold Diet Coke, they get the aggressive sweet sensation, they consume 0 calories, it blunts the craving, and they happily move on with their day. It drastically aids dietary adherence.
it keeps the green marbles safely in the bowl.
Exactly. It is an incredibly effective tool for compliance.
But we have to address the massive elephant in the room regarding aspartame, the cancer risk. Even the World Health Organization recently classified aspartame as a, quote, possibly carcinogenic, unquote, substance.
They did, but let's look closely at that specific classification. Possibly carcinogenic is the exact same regulatory category that includes pickled vegetables, aloe vera extract, and traditional Asian fish sauce.
Oh, wow. I did not realize it was grouped with those.
People hear the word carcinogen and they panic. But the dosage makes the poison. The absurdly high dosages required to actually observe any adverse cancer effects in rodent models are mathematically equivalent to a human being aggressively drinking something like 20 or 30 cans of diet soda every single day for their entire life.
So again, it comes down to basic risk assessment.
Layne's overriding point is incredibly sharp here. Clinical obesity is a heavily proven, highly aggressive carcinogen. Being significantly overweight massively increases your real-world risk of developing multiple types of cancer, severe heart disease, and type 2 diabetes.
The fat tissue itself is dangerous.
Yes. So, if drinking a zero-calorie Diet Coke helps you successfully lose 20 pounds of hazardous body fat, the net health benefit to your system is astronomically positive. The theoretical microscopic risk of the aspartame is utterly negligible compared to the very real immediate risk of carrying excessive body fat.
It's a trade-off, and the math heavily favors the diet soda.
100%.
All right, finally, we have reached the ultimate boss battle of online nutrition discourse, the carnivore diet. Layne Norton has been incredibly vocal and critical about this specific trend.
He really has. And to his credit, he is extremely fair when he analyzes it. He clearly explains precisely why so many people claim they feel absolutely amazing when they switch to an all-meat diet.
Right, because the testimonials are everywhere.
Yeah.
People say it cured their depression, fixed their joints, cleared their skin.
And Layne doesn't deny their experience. He says, look, if you have chronic gut issues or undiagnosed autoimmune sensitivities, and you suddenly switch to a strict carnivore diet, you probably will feel fantastic very quickly.
Because you suddenly cut out literally everything else.
Yes. Carnivore is essentially the ultimate, most restrictive elimination diet on the planet. By eating only beef and water, you are systematically cutting out all complex gluten, all dairy, all artificial food colorings, all complex FODMA carbohydrates, and all rough plant fiber.
So if any one of those specific things was secretly irritating your gut, you instantly removed the culprit.
Exactly. Of course you feel better. But Layne strongly argues it is a massive logical fallacy to then proclaim, well, I feel better eating only meat, therefore the meat itself possesses magical healing properties and all vegetables are toxic.
It's addition by pure subtraction.
Right. You feel better strictly because you finally removed the hidden irritant, not because a ribeye steak is a magical superfood. But the dangerous part is the long-term physiological cost.
The cholesterol issue.
Yes. Strict carnivore diets, which are insanely high in saturated animal fats, invariably drive LDL cholesterol numbers straight through the roof. And despite the endless mental gymnastics the carnivore influencers attempt on podcasts, the global scientific consensus is absolute. Chronically high LDL cholesterol is a direct causal factor for developing atherosclerosis and eventually fatal heart disease.
You are literally building up plaque in your arteries.
It is a long-term numbers game. You might feel great in your joints today, but you are effectively playing biological Russian roulette with your cardiovascular system over the next 20 years.
Layne specifically talks about the asymmetrical logic used by these extreme diet communities. And I found this concept fascinating.
It's incredibly frustrating for actual scientists. The asymmetrical logic is how they selectively demand evidence. The carnivore crowd will aggressively demand completely flawless, decades-long, double-blind, randomized control trials to definitively prove that eating broccoli and spinach is actually good for you.
Which, by the way, we essentially have mountains of data pointing to.
We absolutely do. But then, when it comes to their own extreme diet of eating 3 pounds of ground beef a day, they gleefully accept some guy's random anecdote on Twitter saying, "I feel good, bro," as absolute unquestionable proof that the diet is flawlessly safe.
They set the scientific bar impossibly high for mainstream nutritional science, but incredibly low for their own chosen ideology.
Precisely. And the absolute biggest glaring hole in the carnivore logic is dietary fiber.
Because meat has zero fiber.
Zero. And we have massive, universally replicated mountains of epidemiological and clinical data showing that higher daily fiber intake directly reduces all-cause mortality and significantly lowers the risk of colon cancer.
So by avoiding all plants, you are actively betting against the most consistent data in nutritional science.
You are betting your life against the house, and the house always wins eventually.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of high-level theory, biology, and internet debunking. I want to firmly ground this before we finish. How does a guy like Layne Norton, who knows all this dense science, actually live his daily life? What does his personal routine look like?
He calls his personal approach his truth serum routine. And honestly, when you hear it, it's remarkably boring.
But boring is usually what is most effective in the long run.
Exactly. He typically eats 4 relatively normal meals a day. He ensures there is a high amount of quality protein in every single meal to maximize that protein synthesis signal.
Does he train at 5 a.m. like a crazy person?
No, he actually trains in the mid-afternoon. He looked at his own personal data and realized that simply when his nervous system feels the strongest and most primed. and he takes basic creatine. That's basically the fitness part.
And what about the rest of the day?
The evenings are strictly reserved for what he calls dad mode.
He stressed this heavily in the material, the absolute necessity of stress management.
He was incredibly raw about this. He explicitly stated that leaving a highly toxic, stressful personal relationship did significantly more for his muscle gains and his fat loss than any magical supplement or training program ever could.
Because chronic stress is a biological wrecker.
If your daily life is just a swirling chaos of high cortisol and anxiety, your physiology simply will not cooperate with your fitness goals. Your body is in constant fight-or-flight survival mode, not rest and grow mode. You literally cannot outtrain a chronically stressful life.
Speaking of supplements, since we just mentioned them, Layne generously provided a definitive supplement tier list in the material. And I love a good, brutally honest tier list.
It's great because it cuts through the billion-dollar marketing hype. He breaks it down into 3 tiers based purely on clinical evidence.
Let's start with Tier 1, the absolute must-haves.
He calls Tier 1 the Mount Rushmore of supplements. These are the compounds that categorically work, period. The evidence is undisputed.
Number 1 has to be creatine.
Yes. Creatine monohydrate. It reliably builds muscle, it measurably improves explosive power output, and we're even seeing fantastic emerging data showing it significantly helps with general cognitive function and fighting mental fatigue. Plus, it is incredibly cheap and incredibly safe.
Okay, what is number 2 on the Mount Rushmore?
Good old-fashioned caffeine. It is the single most effective, reliable, pre-workout stimulant ever discovered by humanity. It dramatically lowers your perception of effort, meaning you can push closer to true failure.
And number 3?
High-quality whey protein powder. Now, he clarifies that whey protein is not magical muscle dust. It is literally just a highly convenient, affordable, easily digestible food source to help you hit those high daily protein targets we discussed earlier.
That is a surprisingly short list for the top tier. Just 3 things.
That is the entire point. Everything else the fitness industry sells you is distinctly secondary to those 3.
All right, what about Tier 2, the stuff that might help?
Tier 2 is the promising category. The data is good, but maybe not entirely conclusive for every single person.
Yeah.
First is rhodiola rosea.
I've heard of that. What does it actually do?
It's an adaptogen that seems to help significantly lower your active perception of fatigue during high-volume training. It essentially makes doing very hard work feel a little bit easier mentally.
Okay, that's useful. What else is in Tier 2?
Ashwagandha, which has solid clinical data for helping chronically stressed people manage their daily cortisol levels and anxiety. Melatonin, strictly for helping regulate disrupted sleep cycles. And high-quality omega-3 fish oil for general cardiovascular and joint health.
And finally, we have Tier 3, the graveyard.
The meh category, the stuff people spend hundreds of dollars on that basically does nothing.
Give me the worst offenders.
BCAAs, branched-chain amino acids. The supplement industry pushed these heavily for a decade, but the current science shows that if you are already eating enough total daily protein, drinking colored BCAA water during your workout provides essentially 0 additional muscle-building benefit.
It's just expensive flavored water.
Exactly. Also in Tier 3 is HMB, which was highly touted for preventing muscle breakdown, but mostly proved useless in robust human trials for the general population, and glucosamine for joint pain, which usually performs barely better than a sugar pill placebo in large analyses.
So Layne's advice is to just save your hard-earned money.
Save your money on the Tier 3 garbage and use those funds to buy better quality whole foods or a better mattress to improve your sleep.
I think that specific advice serves as the perfect summary of Layne Norton's entire philosophy. The supplement is always the smallest, weakest lever you can pull. The actual hard work is the biggest, most powerful lever.
It always comes back to his fundamental hierarchy of success. Consistency firmly beats effort, and effort firmly beats optimization.
Do not waste your mental energy worrying about achieving the scientifically perfect lifting tempo if you are only showing up to the gym 1 day a week.
Exactly. Just get the green marbles in the bowl. And if there's one final overarching message to leave the listener with today, it is simply this. You are not physically fragile.
I really love that takeaway.
Whether you are 65 years old and anxiously looking at a barbell for the very first time in your life, or you are someone struggling with a quote-unquote bad back that has sidelined you for years, or you just ate a whole pizza last night and feel overwhelmingly guilty and defeated, your body is a highly adaptable biological machine. Your mind is highly adaptable. You can absolutely handle the load if you expose yourself to it intelligently.
And it leaves us with a truly provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. We talked extensively about pain being an active output of the brain, heavily influenced by stress and fatigue. So ask yourself honestly, how many of your current physical limitations, that chronic bad knee, that inexplicably slow metabolism, that constant lingering afternoon fatigue, how many of those are actually just severe psychological stress and chronic sleep deprivation manifesting themselves as physical symptoms in your body?
It is a profound question. If you genuinely fix the chaotic lifestyle, does the physical body just magically heal itself? The current science heavily suggests it often does exactly that.
So listener, your mission for this week is incredibly simple. Pick just one single big boulder to move.
Just one.
Maybe it's finally getting a full 8 hours of sleep. Maybe it's just hitting your daily protein goal for 5 days straight. Or maybe it's literally putting a combination lock on your own fridge to break a stress habit. Ignore the tiny minutia. Move the big boulder.
Do the actual work.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.